So thank you for joining me for today's workshop on scholarship strategies. This is a workshop I put together based on my own experience, having served on many scholarship selection committees. I currently run two scholarship programs for Arizona State University, and I have served on committees where we vet and select scholars for private foundation scholarships, for public university and college funded scholarships, and for other kinds of scholarships, which I'll get into. And over the years, I've seen a lot of really good students make some really regrettable and easily avoidable mistakes. And so what I wanted to do was offer this kind of a workshop for students to be able to kind of see what things they can, how they can more strategically approach finding scholarships to apply for, and doing a more competitive effort with their answers to common scholarship questions. So this is based on my own experiences. I also have done some comparison with other online resources about applying for scholarships and have incorporated many of those tips as well. So hopefully this is of benefit for you. For those of you that registered for the workshop, I will be sending the slides afterwards, so you can have those to refer to as well. But you might want to have something with you to take notes as we go along. Also, as you have questions, I invite you to put those in the chat box. I have divided my workshop into three sections. So you'll see here, I'm going to start with talking about how to find scholarships that are available for you to apply for. So some different research strategies. The second part of my presentation is on the actual strategies of applying, how you apply for scholarships. And the third section, I'll be addressing some very common kinds of questions you can expect to see in scholarship applications and how to strategically answer those so that you get the most points possible. So for my three sections, my goal is to spend about 10 to 12 minutes on each section and 5 minutes after each section for Q&A and dialogue. But as we go, feel free to go ahead and put those questions or comments in the chat box, and that might help me get through the questions after each section a little bit more efficiently. So let's go ahead and go on to the first part of the presentation, which is on finding scholarships based on this source. So there are three major types or sources of scholarship funds. And the first is private scholarships offered by typically corporations, corporate entities. And I like to start there because this, in my experience, is the category of scholarships that is least well known, that people really often are not aware are out there. And as a result, shocking to me and sad for me, many times I hear about these private scholarships that go under awarded. That means every year they have more money available to give out than they actually give out because they don't get enough qualifying students that know to apply for the scholarship. So I'm going to talk about private scholarships, philanthropic scholarship. These are often coming from charitable trusts and foundations. And then the third category of scholarships are those offered by and through the specific school and college that a student is intending or interested in going to. So I'm going to talk about how to locate and apply for all three kinds of those scholarships. So under private and corporate scholarships, many times these are not as big as the kinds of scholarships you might be able to get through your college or your university, but they're definitely worth applying to. And one reason for that is because, as I mentioned earlier, the corporate scholarships are less well known. There's less students oftentimes applying, so there's less competition. So if you put a lot of work into identifying corporate scholarships that you qualify for and applying to them, you have, frankly, your odds are better that you would be considered for that scholarship compared to the ones that everyone is applying for. And sometimes, in my experience, they're much easier to apply for than the big dollar or the big institution scholarships. So they're less well known. Sometimes the amounts they award out are not as big, but if you get many of them, they add up quickly. And when I was in high school, this was well before the internet existed. So I spent time in my high school counseling office. They had metal file folders, and I would just spend every lunch hour, a couple of days a week, I'd spend my lunch hour looking through paper files. of scholarship information that had been mailed to my school from these different corporate entities. And that's how I found out about a lot of them. But nowadays it's much easier to find them. You just have to know, I can look up and see if there are scholarships offered by these different corporate entities. So one way to begin doing that is just to start by thinking about what are the corporations that you and your family regularly have transactions with and interact with, starting with your employer. So if you live with your parents, or if you work, especially if you work for a private company, as opposed to a government agency or a nonprofit. Those are less likely to have scholarships. But many corporations, especially the larger ones, offer scholarships for their employees who want to go back to school or continue their education, and for the children of their employees. So if your parents or you work for a private corporation, it's worth looking into it. And it's as easy as Googling the name of the corporation and the word scholarship and see if there is a program. And I keep being surprised at how often I find corporations that do offer these that I might not have expected. Also think about how you do your financial banking, whether that's with the private bank like Bank of America or Wells Fargo, or a credit union like I do. And if you have credit cards, what those companies are, and see if they have scholarship programs. So I know my credit union, One Arizona Credit Union, offers a scholarship for people that have accounts and their children. So I've had my money with One Arizona Credit Union for over 20 years. If I had kids, they could qualify to apply for this scholarship. But a lot of people don't know that. So start with who you work for, where you bank, and then maybe take a couple of your grocery receipts and start looking through that and see what corporations am I spending money on, and Google the names of those corporations and the word scholarship and see what you come up with. Go through your bank statements and see what, in addition to products, what services and goods you are spending money on a regular basis. Look up those corporations and see if they offer scholarships. And then, pay attention to commercials. So maybe start with the commercials that you find most annoying, look them up and see if do those companies offer scholarships, or the ones that you think are the most amusing, or whatever. But the commercials can also help you start compiling a list of corporations that you can spend a few seconds on and see, does this corporation offer scholarships? So in my case, I started with my family's groceries. I did brush my teeth with Colgate. We wash our dishes with Palmolive soap. So hopefully, if you brush your teeth and wash dishes, I hope you do. It could well be that the company that makes those products offers scholarships. In this case, Colgate Palmolive, in fact, does offer a scholarship program. I'm about to take all my papers to H&R Block and have them tell me how much money I owe the government. But lo and behold, H&R Block offers a scholarship. In this case, it's for their own employees and children of employees. So if you're parents or if you do seasonal work for H&R Block, you may qualify for a scholarship with them. And there are other examples here that I will scroll through. Coca-Cola, you drink Coke, or even if you don't drink Coke, that's not a barrier to applying. Coca-Cola offers a scholarship program, as does Desert Financial Credit Union. When I was a kid, I like to put this one in here, I had terrible skin. I had really serious skin issues, and I used a lot of Clearasil products. So I thought, well, I'll look it up. And I wrote away for a scholarship application, and they mailed it to me because that's how things happened back in the 90s. And I got a Clearasil scholarship. I got a Coke scholarship. I got a Colgate scholarship. And I think altogether, I got around 9 or 10 small corporate scholarships. They were all around $100, $200, but added up together, it was over $3,000 in corporate scholarships that I got fairly easily. They were pretty easy forms to fill out. They didn't ask nearly as much as many of the other big deal scholarships. McDonald's also has a scholarship. So think about what corporations you interact with, you and your family. Write a list, keep a list going, and spend a few seconds just Googling whether these corporations offer scholarships, and look into what their what the eligibility requirements for them are. The next category of scholarships are those offered through private philanthropies, trusts, and other nonprofit organizations. So in the US at least, it's very common that wealthy individuals and wealthy families, as well as corporations, will set up a separate trust funds or philanthropic nonprofit charities. And a very common thing that they do with the money they set up in those organizations is offer scholarships. The reason they do that, and they do it a lot, is because in many cases it provides a tax advantage to those entities or those individuals. But it's a lot of work to manage a foundation or a trust. So a lot of times what these individuals or families or corporations will do is they will give their money to another organization to manage the trust or the foundation for them. So they don't have to, create a whole nother organization just to spend the money that's in the trust or in the foundation. So a lot of times those are called community foundations. And here in Arizona, we have the Arizona Community Foundation. So you could just look up Arizona Community Foundation online with the word scholarship, and it will take you to the scholarships portal for Arizona Community Foundation. And here you see a link that you can click on or type in, and it's a really helpful 3-minute video about what kind of scholarships they offer and who they are and that kind of thing. But the benefit there is these umbrella community foundations like ACF, Arizona Community Foundation, will let you apply in one place. So you fill out one application, you answer a whole lot of questions, and it matches you with all of the different scholarships that they manage. In the case of Arizona Community Foundation, that's dozens, maybe hundreds of different scholarships. So you answer all these sometimes strange sounding questions like, do you have a parent that served in the military? Do I identify as LGBT? Have you worked with abused animals? Blah, blah, blah. And it may seem odd, like, why are they asking me these really weird and unconnected questions? But those questions help them identify what you qualify for among all of the different scholarships. So it's worth spending some time applying through your local community foundation. If you're in Arizona, ACF, Arizona Community Foundation is the way to go. And then there are other private foundation scholarships that may or may not link through Arizona Community Foundation, such as the Flynn Foundation Scholarship, which is the largest private scholarship offered in Arizona for Arizona graduating high school seniors, and the Dorrance Scholarship, which is a really similar one. So those may be harder to find if you don't know about them. Many times these foundations and philanthropies don't have a budget to promote or advertise their scholarships. So you have to do some digging, but a lot of times the way they get the word out is by sending information to schools. So if you're not in touch with your school's guidance counselor, if you're in high school, or with your college's Office of Financial Aid, get to know them and ask about what private foundations they work with that offer scholarships. And then the third category of scholarships are those offered through the school or the university that you're interested in attending or are attending. And so in our case, we have some really useful sites provided by Arizona State University and the Maricopa Community Colleges that are pretty much one-stop shops for students. So if you are planning to attend or thinking of attending or are currently attending, so scholarships are not just for new incoming students, they're also for students that are already enrolled, taking classes. Every year, it's worth looking into what you qualify for and what you can apply for. But these universities and colleges offer portals that will help find many different scholarships that you qualify for. And sometimes they offer that one unified application where you apply one time and it shares your information with all the different scholarship programs. So the way to start is just to search by the name of your school. Arizona State University or Maricopa Community Colleges or Northern Arizona University or wherever it is that you're attending or planning to attend, plus the word scholarships. And in almost every case, that takes you right to the page that has all that helpful information. As you do that, it's important to know the difference between need-based and merit-based scholarships. Need-based is all about money. So it's more about we want to provide funding support for students who don't have resources to pay their own way through college, whose families may not be able to support them. Merit-based scholarships are entirely different. Merit-based scholarships generally don't care and don't ask about your assets. So they won't require your family's tax information or your financial need statement. It's all about earning it. So merit-based scholarship, they're very different, but they can say, we're looking for students that show a lot of promise in biomechanical engineering or first generation Hispanic students or what have you. So merit-based scholarships typically don't even collect or ask you for any information about your economic situation. There are some scholarships that are both merit-based and need-based, some combination, but it's important to know the difference between the two. And I just real quick wanted to show you what those pages look like for ASU and for the Maricopa Community Colleges. So the ASU scholarship page looks like this. And if you scroll down, you'll see scholarship search here takes you to a page where you can put in your preferences or your information about yourself, such as you're an incoming first-year student. I'm going to be a freshman next year, and I'm pretty sure my GPA is going to be about a 3.7, and I am an Arizona resident, and I plan to go full-time. So you do that, and you can search, and it will pull up everything that, based on what you said, you qualify for, and that is still available for you to apply. So for that hypothetical student, here are all the scholarships they could apply for, and here are the deadlines. So some of them are coming up real soon, like March 15th. That's less than a week from now. And for each one, you can click on it and see more information. This scholarship is financial assistance for up to 10, blah, blah, blah. And you can see, okay, what are they looking for? Is there a minimum GPA? It's competitive. So that factors into who gets the money and information about and then you'll notice here, some of these say portal app and some say external to ASU. So what that means is if it's portal app, it's one that you can apply directly through the ASU system. External takes you to a website outside of ASU to apply for that scholarship. But the ASU, this page really just helps identify everything that you could possibly qualify for. And in this case, it's many. You can see there's like more than 6 pages of scholarships that are possibly available to you. So you could go further and put in more filters like, I want to go to the Tempe campus, I'm going to be a student in the engineering school, and further refine the list like that. And in this case, engineers at the Tempe school, there's like 1 scholarship that is still available for you to apply to. So it's pretty easy to use. The other one I wanted to show you is the Maricopa Community College scholarship portal. It's very easy to use as well. But here, notice they have district scholarships and foundation scholarships. So the distinction is district scholarships go through the Maricopa Community College system. That matters because Maricopa, like ASU, are government, they're public higher ed institutions. That means they are limited by the rules of how government agencies do things. And so this matters, for example, for students who may not be US citizens. Many scholarships require citizenship, but others don't. In many scholarships, especially the need-based ones, will ask for your income information through the FAFSA form. So the free application for federal student aid is the official way that you tell scholarships how much you need in order to attend school. But undocumented students, for example, probably wouldn't be able to complete a FAFSA. So if students that don't qualify for the district scholarships here, you'll see down here the foundation scholarships are offered by private entities that aren't limited in those ways. So undocumented students in this example could search foundation scholarships and see what's available for them to apply for. So very easy to use in both cases, but it's just worth taking some time to familiarize yourself with those systems. If you're planning to go to a different school, then it just starts with really familiarizing yourself with the scholarships page that's offered by the school that you are attending or are planning to attend. Let me go back to my presentation here. And again, as a reminder, as we go through this, hang on real quick. As we go through this, feel free to throw questions or comments in the chat box. Here we go. Okay. And the final way to search scholarships is by topic or interest area. So literally about 10 minutes before I started this workshop, I got an email from a colleague that's promoting a scholarship for students that want to intern and learn about and work on issues related to homelessness in the Phoenix area. So it's a $5,000 scholarship to do this internship working at the Human Services campus, where you'll learn about issues regarding homelessness and you'll get to work and do things that are helpful for people experiencing homelessness. So that happens to be one of the scholarships you can get to through the portal. But the other way to identify it is if you care about homelessness, that's one of your issues that you want to get involved in. You could just Google homelessness and scholarship, and you would probably find this opportunity, or any other issue: domestic violence, veterans, military families, animal abuse, whatever rings your bell. Put it in there with the word scholarship and see what you get. And that's another way to find some that might otherwise be hard to find. Okay, application fees. Just a quick word on this. There are a lot of scam organizations out there that if you see anything that says you need to pay money in order to be able to apply for scholarships or for them to make you and identify scholarships for you, don't fall for it. That's a scam. You should never have to pay money to apply for a scholarship. But you likely do have to pay money to apply for college. So colleges and universities do most of the time have you pay an application fee when you apply to attend. That can add up to a lot of money if you are applying to multiple institutions. Like when I was in high school, I was applying to schools in Texas and California and Arizona because I wanted to be warm. I didn't want to go anywhere cold. But the California and Texas schools cost a lot. Fortunately, though, well, I don't know if I can say most of the time, but many times they have waivers that all you have to do is ask. Some of them put it right on their website. Click here for information about financial assistance or whatever. Others, it's not as obvious, but if you ask, they're like, yeah, here, fill out this form online, and and in many cases, it's pretty straightforward. You just request a waiver and they give you the waiver. So it's worth asking about fee waivers if paying the application fee to register for college is burdensome, which for most people it is. So there's no need to be embarrassed about that at all. Also, something that I did and was pretty successful with in my small rural town, not a town full of wealthy people, was went around to service organizations. So many communities have like Rotary clubs or Seroptimus clubs or other clubs where professionals and retirees will gather and do service projects in the community. I requested to come to those meetings in my town and have a minute to ask for support. And I said, I'm applying to go to this program, this Summer Leadership Institute, or I'm applying to attend this college, and I'd like to ask if your organization might consider sponsoring me. And I got probably about $400 or $500 from those organizations in Sierra Vista to help me apply for those programs. The other thing you can do is put together a fundraiser, especially if it's for more than just yourself. So if you and your friends are all, dealing with issues of how do we pay for all these applications, why not have a car wash or a bake sale or an online fundraiser of some kind, a GoFundMe, and say, we the students at Mesa High School or Tempe High are aspire to continue our education, and we'd like to ask the community support to help us pay for our application fees. You would be surprised at how excited people are to help students. And so I think you might be surprised at how much you're able to raise by asking people to help you go to college, by just helping you pay the application fees. And that also is something you can talk about in your scholarship applications, about how you put this effort together to benefit yourself and your fellow students. Okay, now we're down to part two. I'm going to start my timer, which I forgot to do earlier. Part two is about when you are applying for the scholarship and how to go about that in a more strategic way. So the first piece of advice is, before you start filling out the scholarship, before you start answering the questions and putting in your information, the first thing you should do is figure out your letters of recommendation. Who are you going to ask? Make those requests before you do anything else, because you want to give your recommenders the most amount of time possible to write a good letter for you. And I do a whole separate workshop on writing letters or requesting letters of recommendation. So when you get my email after this workshop with the slides from this workshop, if you would like the information about letters of recommendation, just let me know, and I'm happy to share that with you as well. But there's a whole strategy that goes into letters of recommendation. It's not as easy as just saying, oh, hey, Professor so-and-so, would you write me a letter? There's more to it. And definitely don't do what most students do, which is wait till the end of the process and then remember, oh yeah, I need 2 letters of recommendation and the deadline's next week. Let me figure out who can write my letter at the last minute. That's the worst possible way to do it. So start with letters of recommendation and then look at what the scholarship application requires. So how many questions, what kind of questions, how many questions they want you to complete, and what additional things you need to get together. Do they want do they want you to send them a resume? Do you need to do a cover letter? Do you need to have letters of recommendation that you send in? If so, how many? Transcripts, like what are all the things you need to pull together? How much time will you need to do that? When is everything due? And then give yourself a bubble of safety time to play with. So if it's due on March 30th, then maybe your deadline is March 23rd, a week before that deadline. And then time out. In order to have everything I need together by March 23rd, when do I need to do X? When do I need to have Y completed? And so work backwards from the deadlines to make sure you have everything you need well before midnight on the day that it's due. And factor in edits and revisions. So one of the most common mistakes I see students make is they write everything up and they just send it in without having someone else check it. And so that's how a lot of great students lose points because they didn't catch that they didn't really answer the question entirely or appropriately, or bad grammar, or other easy to fix grammar things that just escape their attention. So make sure you build in time to have other people read what you've written and give you feedback on it before you send it in. All right, so first big strategy issue here is make sure you're answering the question that has been asked. That sounds really obvious, but I can't tell you how many students with 4.0 GPAs get points deducted or don't get considered because they didn't really understand the question, or they answered a different question, or very commonly they take something they wrote for something else and copy and paste it as their answer to this question. And it really, I have these shapes in the top corner. Maybe a lot of you had this toy as a little kid where you have to put the shapes in the corresponding holes. But a lot of times it feels like they're trying to shove a square into the circle. And it's obvious to people like me that are reading these that, oh, I think this student just recycled an answer and they didn't really fix it so that it fully or meaningfully answers the question that we asked them. Sometimes it seems like the student didn't really understand the question. If you're not sure what is being asked, ask for help. So either ask your teacher, ask somebody you trust, what does this question really mean, or what are they asking me to say in this question? Sometimes what you can also do is ask whatever program you are applying to. I'm applying for your scholarship. I just had a question about number 3. Can you clarify for me the meaning of X blah, blah, blah? And more often than not, if it's not the last minute, if it's not the day before it's due, if they have time, they'll say, certainly what our intention is for you to explain to us, blah, blah, blah. So if you're not sure, ask for help, ask for somebody else, or ask the organization to help explain what the nature of the question is. And then the second point here is make sure you've answered all of the question. This is another killer for many students, because they'll do a great job answering the first part of the question and forget that there's more to it. So it might be, who is a leader that you admire, and what are the lessons that we can glean from studying their life story? So the student will maybe spend all of the 500 words talking about how Margaret Mead was a inspiring female in anthropology, and the work that she did led other women to blah, blah, blah. But they might not, and they'll feel really good about it, but they don't answer the second part of the question, which is what are the lessons we can learn from that person's life. So make sure you have answered every part of every question. And as I mentioned before, it's not necessarily bad to reuse something you've written before, but make sure you fix it or tweak it or customize it so that it really does work for the question that you're pasting it into. Don't just copy paste. Make sure you have adjusted it so that it really is a good answer for that question. Okay, so this picture here in the corner is me and people like me. Literally, this is not an exaggeration. Especially in the old days when we would go to review scholarships, oftentimes we would have boxes, 2 or 3 or 4 boxes full of printouts of applications that we had to read every one. Now it's exhausting page after page that we're scrolling through on our computers, reading all of these students, scoring them, figuring out who moves forward to finalist round and so forth. So honestly, we are just trying to get through your application as fast as possible. That's not good news for you. So it's really, you have to think about how are you going to stick out from the dozens of other scholarships that I'm reading that day. And so one way to consider point 2 here is, what do you think, for whatever the question is, what are a lot of people likely to say? And how can you avoid saying something that's going to sound very similar to what everyone else has said? So for you, you need to think about, picture me or picture this gentleman here with this horrifying stack of applications. How are we going to remember you 10 applications after we finished reading your application? Are you just going to blend in with everyone else? What is something you can say that will really be memorable and give us a sense for you and your personality, that we can picture you and really feel like we got to know you a little bit? For whatever the question is, what is everyone else going to say? How can you say something different, but still be sincere and genuine in your answer? A very common question, which I don't like, because it is so question, is describe a person that you admire or that you look up to. Who is somebody that you look up to or you admire, and why? The reason I don't like that question, it's not a bad question, but it's because everybody talks about their mom. And I had a question like that when I was in high school, and I wrote about my mom. But when you're the reviewer and you're reading one essay after another about everyone's moms, and everyone's moms sacrificed and worked hard and encouraged them to shoot for the stars and help them believe in themselves. That's great, but that's common and it is forgettable. So if you are going to write about your mom, you better bring it. So you better write about it in a way that goes beyond just my mom worked hard, my mom's a saint, she's perfect, I love her, and she makes me love life, whatever. Talk about some specifics about what you have learned from your mother, about, I don't know, in my case, I wrote about the specific obstacles that my mom had to overcome just to survive, and how her story of survival, despite terrible abuse and neglect, um, affected me and my sisters and what we want to do with our lives. So I didn't just say my mom works hard, she sacrificed a lot, she believes in us, because everyone says that. I had to go a little further and say, what about my mom's life informs what I do in what specific ways, and what kind of a person I am. So through all of that, you are telling your story, and it's really important to tell that story effectively, which I'll get into a little bit more. And do that, point number 4 here, in your own voice. So here's the next mistake I see very often with students, good students, nice people, but I think in their efforts to try and be competitive, they try to sound like the perfect young person. And they use big words, oftentimes not correctly, or correctly, but in a way that doesn't sound natural. It sounds artificial. And I'm reading these awkward essays and very formal language with a lot of big words. And I think, does this student really talk like this? And it's just clear, this is a put on for us. This student is pretending to be this other kind of person, and it just doesn't feel genuine. So you want to use your own voice. That said, you want to use correct grammar and spelling and those kinds of things, but you want it to sound like you. So if you read it and you have somebody else read it and they say, well, this sounds a little artificial, that is a problem. So definitely you want it to really come across in your own personality. So I mentioned story. I just want to put a little bit more effort into here because I feel like a lot of students that have really powerful stories hold back because they maybe don't know or maybe think it's not appropriate to talk about dramatic things or sad things in their scholarship applications when really the opposite is often true. So drama and emotion in how you respond to essay questions in the scholarships can really be your best friend. Those are the kinds of things that will make me remember your application out of the 20 that I read today. I will remember that story about learning to cook this traditional meal from your grandmother, and now she's passed away. And when you make it's your connection to her, blah, blah, blah. I remember that story 20 years later. I'll remember the story about your father losing his job and how your family struggled and how you ended up having to work and that impacted your grades. But as a result of that, blah, blah, blah. That story is dramatic and it's real. And I remember that. So use your own experiences and your family's experiences to do more than just say you're a good student and you're responsible and you want to go into mechanical engineering. Why do you want to go into mechanical engineering? Tell a story that helps explain that kind of thing. It is not only okay, but it can really help if you bring in stories and examples that relate to maybe your culture or your religion or your family's traditions. Traditions are interesting. People have curiosity about groups and practices outside of what they've experienced. So those are also the kinds of things that will make your application stand out. But only do that if you can sincerely use those examples and stories in ways that really answer the question. So if you're just shoving in a story for the sake of being interesting, but it doesn't really get to what the question asks, then that's not going to help you. And then finally, the other point here is I think a lot of times students feel like they can't use stories that aren't perfect stories, that don't have a happy ending, where everything didn't work out great in the end. They feel like maybe that it will hurt them to talk about something they tried and failed at, or where they had a blemish in their record. In fact, if you don't have a perfect GPA, if you failed some classes at some point, not only should you not avoid talking about that, you probably need to talk about that and explain to us why you are worth taking a chance on. If I look at your transcript and I see, oh, this student failed a bunch of classes their junior year, I might think you don't have what it takes to be successful in college. Unless you told me, you may have noticed I don't have a perfect GPA, but what's important for you to know is my family went through, we were homeless for half of the year, and I often didn't have access to the internet to do my assignments, or I didn't have reliable transportation to get to and from school, and blah blah blah. Well, that's important for me to know. So that tells me you're not just a lazy student or someone that doesn't care. That despite these horrible barriers, you persevered, you pushed through, and this is what you're doing to try and catch up, or what have you. So conflict, failure, unhappy stories actually can really explain your context and your motivations in ways that are very, very powerful and impactful. So you've written all your essays. Now you need to make sure that you've done so in a way that is balanced. So this is what we call tone check. So everyone has friends. I think everyone has friends in their network that are on the kind of cotton candy rainbows spectrum of emotional status, and everything they write is so sweet and so earnestly optimistic, and it's a little sickening. And then we all have friends that are on the dark side of the spectrum that are kind of gloom and doom and cynical and negative. You don't want to sound like either of those extremes in your essays. So I have an example here about the hypothetical question. What is, how do you see yourself making a difference in the world? That's a real question that I've seen a few times in different ways. And so one student might write, well, I think just by making time to smile at people and show them that I appreciate them, that will make all the difference, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? I want to strangle somebody that writes something like that. Not that I'm against smiles, but it's just so naive and shallow. Smiling at people, how is that going to address homelessness and domestic violence and senior citizens being abused in nursing homes? A smile is not enough. And so that kind of a response to me comes across as immature, out of touch. Maybe they're not paying attention to what's really happening in the real world. They're shallow. And so for me, that student is not ready. They're not where we want them to be to meaningfully address issues that affect them in their community. On the other end of the spectrum, if your essay is all sad and scary and pessimistic, uh, that's not a good thing either, because that comes across as lacking in hope and aspiration. And the concern with those kinds of students is we think this student may not be able to, may not have what it takes to work through challenging situations. They may just give up. They're already in a dark place. They haven't shown that they have any hope or optimism. So when things get tough for them, the student's probably just gonna, break and maybe drop out. So you don't want to come across as too dark or too silly, too childish or too cynical. You want balance. So that's where you want to write your essays, from a place of knowing about the real things happening in the world, challenges, problems, sad and scary things, but also demonstrating some hope, some optimism and determination. Things are bad, but I want to be part of making them better. So that's the kind of balance you want to hit emotionally. So that's what we mean by check it for tone. And sometimes it's hard to tell for yourself, something you've written, it's hard to tell how it sounds to somebody else. So this is another reason why you want to have someone else read your stuff and give you feedback. So here's some questions. When you're writing scholarship essays, is it appropriate to be funny? Is it appropriate to show anger? What do you guys think? You can feel free to unmute or put something in the chat box. Do you think it's a good idea to be humorous or to convey anger in your responses to scholarship essays? Okay.
I was gonna say, I kind of think so, like, depending on the topic of what you're talking about, and like you said, like creating that balance, like you can be humorous, but not throughout the whole essay, or you know what I'm saying? Like just making sure that it's like appropriate timing, I guess.
Absolutely perfect answer. Yes. And in fact, if you are funny, please be funny appropriately in your essays. Again, remembering me with that stack of applications, it's a drag. It's hard work. It's boring to read all of these dry, robotic, humorless essay responses, very serious essay responses. So the student then that is able to answer the question in a way that's funny and bring some lightness into their response, I am so grateful to that student. So as long as they've answered the question and said something meaningful, if you can go beyond that and also be funny, for me, that gets all the points. What about anger? I think you mentioned that in your response as well. Yes, yes, with an asterisk. Yes, if it is appropriately conveyed, if it is answering the question, and if it is helpful in terms of informing us about who you are and what you care about. So the example that comes to mind for me was an essay I read from a student who wrote about finding out that in another school, he had friends that were going to school in a more wealthy community. They had a whole group of teachers and counselors that worked with students on preparing for the SAT and ACT tests. And he went back to his school, which was in, frankly, a poor community. And he said, how do I find out about our school's program to coach us on the ACT and the SAT? And they didn't have that program. They're like, no, we don't do that. And it made him mad. He was angry, and it came across in his essay, his outrage that students that needed the most support got none. And students that were coming from communities with a lot of resources had all these people coaching and preparing them, giving them even more advantages. And so he went about, he got his friends together and they created a club where they coached each other and they reached out and looked for resources online and practiced tests and did other things to help each other get ready for the SAT and ACT. And myself and my fellow committee members, we couldn't have been more excited to read that. It was an angry response, but it was appropriately angry, and it was written in a way that really informed us about this person's determination and where he was coming from. So humor and anger can absolutely be powerful tools, but be careful about how you do it so that you make sure you don't come across as unbalanced. So back to that tone check thing, and that you are answering the question. And one person said, yes, it gives human element and develops empathy. So yes, very, very useful to do that. Okay, pay attention to the instructions. It sounds dumb to say that, but I can't tell you how many otherwise magnificent students just didn't follow the instructions. So they maybe wrote a wonderful, beautiful, moving essay, but it didn't really answer the question or all parts of the question. Or they wrote a long essay and they weren't paying attention to the word or character limits. So we only see the first 2 paragraphs and maybe there's 3 more really dynamite paragraphs, but we can't even see it because of the system requirements. So you have to pay attention to those details. If you need to upload or send in attachments, make sure you're paying attention to what kinds of attachments, what kind of files, what do you need to include with your scholarship? Make sure you've done everything they've asked for. And very important here, spelling and grammar matter, and they will kill your scholarship chances. So you can write beautifully, but if I'm reading it and I can see real obvious mistakes with spelling, grammar, and punctuation, I'm not going to be able to justify giving you all of the points, especially because it's the kind of thing that's so easy to find and check. So things like the there, and there, people get those wrong. If you're not sure, go refresh yourself. There's everything on the internet now to refresh yourself on which one of those you want to use, whose and whose, it's and it's, things like that. They're so easy and they will cost you points. People that use apostrophes after a noun to make it a plural, that's a real common and a very annoying mistake. And my personal most hated thing that people do is put quotation marks around a word or a phrase to emphasize it. The most amusing example for me is a picture of a sign from a restaurant bathroom where over the sink it says employees must wash hands before returning to work, but they put quotation marks around wash hands. So what does it actually end up meaning? I think most people think that means pay attention to this word or phrase, but what you're actually saying is I don't mean it. So that sign really looks like it's saying, nudging and winking, saying, we have to say you have to wash hands, but we don't really expect you to wash your hands. So don't use quotation marks to emphasize something. That is a big problem. And the easiest thing to do is what I say, look for the wavy lines of doom. So when you're writing in a browser or in a Word document, or I think even in Excel, like most applications on your computer, when you're writing something, if the computer thinks you're making a mistake, it will tell you. There'll be that little red or green or blue little squiggly line underneath the word or the phrase that the computer says, you've screwed up here. But so many times people just ignore it. They turn a blind eye to the fact the computer is warning you that you're in danger. So don't ignore it. Pay attention to the wavy lines of doom. Right click on it, and a lot of times it will tell you how to fix it. You need a comma here, or you don't need that comma there, or this is misspelled, or what have you. But your computer is your best friend. Trust your computer. Pay attention to that and have somebody else check it. If you're not good at grammar and spelling, put extra effort into making sure somebody else is checking your work. A lot of schools, colleges, and universities have free writing labs where they have people that just do that. They'll read your stuff, write it, mark it up, and give it back to you. Okay, things to not do. These will cost you many points. if you come across sounding smug, vain, or boastful. I put an asterisk there because you are supposed to talk about yourself and how great you are. That's it may feel weird, but you're supposed to do that in your application, but do that in a way that doesn't make you sound like a jerk. And so one way to do that is to talk about your accomplishments and your achievements in a way that is conveyed with humility and gratitude. So I was able to do X, Y, and Z thanks in large part to these people that helped me, or to these lessons that I learned from doing this thing, or I had these advantages and I'm grateful for them because of my family was able to give me these resources or provide me with these experiences. But I know that many other students don't have those advantages, uh, and so I'm, conscious of how that has given me a leg up compared to others, and I want to do what I can to learn about and to, whatever. So write about your accomplishments and your achievements in ways that are humble and grateful, and recognizing what around you outside of yourself made it possible for you to achieve those things. Don't use slang expressions unless you're maybe quoting a dialogue from a story that you're telling about. You and your friends had this experience and it's answering a question, but you're quoting something somebody says, then you might use slang expressions. Um, the third bullet point, I shouldn't have to say this, but don't put in your scholarship essays anything that conveys your intolerance, uh, your disparaging attitude about other groups of people. And yet students do this. And I don't understand how you can write things that come across as racist or sexist or homophobic or intolerant of other people's religions. Here in Arizona, I've read many essays from people that have said really inappropriate things about Mormons or Mormon religion, or about Catholics, or about immigrants, or about Latinos, or on and on. And I just roll my eyes. I'm like, what were you thinking? How could you not know that that's not okay? So you don't know who's reading your essays. Don't take anything for granted. Don't put your intolerance and hatred in your essay questions. Avoid using acronyms. So if you're listing things you're involved in, spell out the organizations. Don't put CYO, put Catholic Youth Organization. Don't put FBLA, right? Future Business Leaders of America. And then in parentheses, put the acronym. But don't assume that I, the reader, know what those organizations are. Explain it to me. Try to avoid cliches. I can't read one more essay that starts with Webster's Dictionary defines tenacity as a, don't give me a Webster's Dictionary definition. It's the most annoying thing in the world. So avoid cliches, write in your own voice, be genuine. And like I said, check it, edit it. The first thing you should do after you've written your essay is read it out loud to yourself. And a lot of times hearing yourself, you'll pick up on things that you don't see when you're just reading it silently. So saying it out loud will help you catch where you keep using the same word too many times, or where your sentence is way too long and you need to break it up, things like that. So first step is just read it aloud. Then review the question and make sure that your answer has fully addressed that question. Take some time and read it again later. Have someone you respect as knowing their stuff, have them read it and edit it for you. And separate from your teacher or whoever is going to edit your grammar and spelling, have someone that knows you well, that really knows you, that you trust, that will tell you the truth and be real with you. Have your honest friend read it and tell you, does this sound like me? Does this legitimately sound like how I am, how I talk? Because they'll say, no, this comes across phony as hell, man. Or who are you trying to be? So you want that feedback. And a lot of times, because you've written it, you're not going to really be able to see it yourself. But you got to leave yourself time to do all of that. All right, so the third part of our session here, real quick review of what kinds of questions you can expect. And I will go through them and talk for each one about strategies. So one of the most challenging kinds of questions are these broad questions where you could say almost anything and students don't know where to begin. A lot of times these are called position statements or goal statements or personal statements. And people don't know where to begin. But basically, what one way to approach writing these is to talk about how you see your future. Like what what are your goals for who you want to be as a person, for what kind of a career you want to get into, what kind of leadership roles you aspire to. Talk about things that you're considering but maybe haven't decided. Like I've thought of going into anthropology, but I'm also thinking about graphic design. And then why? Because of these things. This is why this is interesting to me. Or I'd like to go to college to explore and learn more about this to see if it's a good fit for me, etc. Vision just means your idea of the perfect world. So in your mind, if things were different, how would you want them to be different, to be better? And what way could you help bring that about? So with those broad goal or personal statement questions, you should be answering the big question of why. You want to go to college to do what? What will a college degree, your degree, help you be able to accomplish for yourself or others or the community? So why get an education? To do what? That's what you want to answer in those broad questions. Give us a sense of who you are, your personality, your strengths, the things you're interested in, what has shaped you into the kind of person that you are, where you're going in your life, what matters most to you. So that's how to address those. Then we have what I call the creative writing questions, where they'll give you some kind of sometimes silly sounding fictional scenario. They'll often start with words like, imagine yourself, or picture yourself, or my favorite, if you had a magic wand, and then you're supposed to respond to that scenario. So what you need to do is try and figure out, what are they getting at? What do they want me to say? What is this really about? And a lot of times it's giving you a more flexible way to tell us what you value, what's important to you, and also show us that you can write well. So with those, it's really great to be entertaining, but have a point. Don't just tell a fantastic story, have some meaning in it. An example is a scholarship question that said, you have a time machine, you can go back to any time in the world's history and spend the day with any world leader that you would like. And you could bring them with you to any other point in time. So who would you spend the day with and what would you do? And we got a lot of really hilarious and entertaining questions, but most of them didn't have a point. One was really well written, and it was about going back in time and taking Albert Einstein on a tour of all the major roller coasters in the United States. It was well written, I remember it, but it didn't go anywhere. So he never explained why Albert Einstein, why did he pick that guy, and why the roller coasters, and what would he hope to gain from spending a day on roller coasters with Albert Einstein. So that could have been a magnificent essay. It got 0 points because it was just a silly story. Position statements ask you to take a position and defend it. So it's not your opinion about things, it's a persuasive argument that you back up with facts and reasoning. And the most effective responses to those, don't just defend your own position. I'm in favor of increasing our nation's reliance on nuclear energy in order to help decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. Well, explain the why, but the best answers to that will also say, people that are opposed to nuclear energy would say these things, boom, 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 and then speak to those concerns. They would say, we don't yet have safe, reliable ways to store toxic waste from nuclear energy. But how do you answer that concern? So to start with your position, explain it with facts and reasoning, mention the opposition, and counter those points as well. That gets 100 points and is really an impressive way to address those. The challenge and obstacle questions, I call these the sad story questions. Here's how people misunderstand those questions. It is not about giving money to the person with the worst life and the saddest story to tell. That is not the point of these. Describe a challenge or an obstacle you have had to overcome. What we want from those questions is to learn how negative experiences, misfortune has shaped you, and how you have taken something sad or bad or negative and found some positive thing to take from that. So we're looking for your problem solving skills, your ability to persevere through adversity. What lessons did you learn from it? How did that give you strengths and abilities and awareness that someone that hasn't been in that experience wouldn't have? Maybe how did it shape your goals and your determinations? Because of your health issues, you want to make sure that someone else going through that kind of thing has a better outcome than you did, or what have you. So how has the experience changed you in a positive way? And what you want to leave us with is not just sad and sorry, feeling sorry for you. That isn't what we want. We want you to leave us with some hopefulness and some resolve. Yes, my mother died in this car accident, and I lost my legs in that car accident. Um, but don't stop there. Say, because of that, it has given me a greater appreciation for um, how how fragile life is, and it's made me put more effort into my relationships and letting people know. But whatever. So tell us, what is the good thing that comes out of the bad thing? Don't just make us sad for you. And community issues, these are usually worded as describe an issue in your community that you would like to change or make a difference in, things like that. You can't answer that question unless you know what's going on in your community. And this is a big problem for a lot of high school students, because nowadays it's less common than it used to be for teenagers and college age students to really be up to speed with local news. A lot of that is the fault, frankly, of the news media. So it's not entirely, it's easy to point fingers, but we have a lot less local news coverage than we used to traditionally, and it's not as good. So you have to make more effort to be informed about what's happening in your neighborhood, in your community, in your city, in your state. And you can't have opinions about those things until you know. So some ways to, if you're not already highly informed about your neighborhood and community, is to start strategically changing, making some habits where you can on an ongoing basis be informed. State and local news sources, online groups, community websites and social media pages like Nextdoor. Maybe ask your elected official, your city council member, or your neighbors, what are issues you care about? What are some things you wish you could change about this? And then maybe write about what you heard people say about those. My personal favorite is NPR. When I'm driving around or doing chores in my house, I have it on, and it lets me know what's going on, what do I need to know about. So those community issue questions want you to identify problems or challenges, tensions between different groups of people, how your community is changing, things that you can imagine would be great for your community. And you can also define community as more than just your neighborhood or your city. So community can also be communities that you define for yourself, your affiliations, your interests. It could be a community based on race or ethnicity, your religious community, your avocations. Maybe you're into ice skating or hockey, or it can be a community based on ability or disability. I have a learning disability, and here's what I do to be part of and to support other people with that disability, those kinds of things. And then the last category is service reflections. Here's a big mistake that people make. When you're asked to write about your volunteer and service experiences, we don't give a damn about your feelings. Do not write your service reflection and use words like how happy you were, or how excited, or how proud you were to be able to help the orphans in that church in Mexico, or how beautiful the smile on the face of the little girl was. I don't care about that. We don't care about your feelings. Your service reflection essay should tell us what you learned and how you grew as a person. So write about what you did, and then tell us, what the meaning of that is in terms of what you thought going into the experience and how your perspective changed because you had that experience. Before I worked at the soup kitchen, my perception of the homeless was that they all blah, blah, blah. But I really learned that, in fact, blah, blah, blah. So how did your perspective change? How did you grow as a person? And how will you apply that service experience moving forward? So again, don't write about your feelings. Write what you learned about the issue, what you learned about yourself. And you can very helpfully write what is left unresolved for you. So I did this thing, but I'm still uncomfortable. I still have questions about whether or not this really makes a difference. Handing out sandwiches at the soup kitchen. Is this really addressing the bigger issues of homelessness? I'm still curious about why so many military veterans end up homeless. I was shocked about how many small children are getting fed at these facilities. And it makes me wonder, what more could we do as a society to help families stay off the streets, things like that. So write about those things that you're still wrestling with. And then just be thoughtful about what we might expect you to have opinions about because of what's happening in the world. So this is for right now, March 2021. I would expect students that I'm going to interview or read their applications to have some awareness and have some thoughts to share about what's happening specifically around all of the issues with racial inequities and systemic injustices in the US, especially with regards to how the police and the community interact. If you don't know anything about that and don't have anything to say, that doesn't look good for you. The whole world has been struggling with the pandemic. And so I expect you to have thoughts about what government agencies are doing to address the pandemic, how people have reacted to like mask requirements, how the government is providing relief measures to help people survive. What are your thoughts about those things? So if you don't have thoughts, you need to study up and catch up quick. We just had a presidential election and it's having significant outcomes with regards to our elections and voting. There's legislation that wants to dramatically change how we vote in this country. So these are things you can expect to be asked about either in your scholarship or in your interview. So you need to pay attention. So that is that's what I have for you. I went a little over my time, but I do want to open the floor for questions. So you can either unmute or you can put any questions you have in the chat, or just observations, takeaways. What are some aspects of the workshop that wouldn't have occurred to you otherwise? I see some thanks in the chat. Well, I will take that as an indication that I was comprehensive in how I presented the information. Hopefully this was helpful and thought-provoking. I will share the slides so you can use it to refer to and share with others. Perhaps you're helping people with their scholarships. I just think it's a good checklist to go through step by step, especially as they're answering the essay questions, to say, okay, what kind of a question is this? What kind of strategies would make for the best kind of response to those? But a lot of it really just depends on giving yourself enough time to put in a thoughtful answer and revise it, have other people read it and give you feedback. Give your letter writers for recommendations a lot of time to write your letter. And as I mentioned again, if you'd like the letter recommendation tips, just let me know when you get my email and I'm happy to share those with you. Otherwise, no other questions or comments. I appreciate you all joining me for today, and I wish you all the best of luck. Congratulations.